That is when I remembered the small farm outside the town of Dana. I remembered there were several, mom and pop, farms just outside the small town. Most of those farmers grew berries and summer fruit. I hadn't been there since coming to Sierra. I recalled I owned one of the small farms and thought I would like to go visit. Also, I wondered if I would find anything growing. I imagined the different berries and the two small orchards I had. The farm, I said. Late spring, early summer, Dana replied. That was just what I was thinking, I said. Curiously, I felt like making jam as a flood of thoughts filled my mind. A minute ago, I didn't have a clue, and now, one moment later, I can say I have always loved the farm this time of the year, picking berries, picking fruit from the orchards and canning them. Doing so was one of my oddities, I guess, but after a year of neglect I was unclear what I would find once there. I looked at Dana and said, I think I will pass out. Jeff, I saw the expression change on your face. Are you all right? I replied, I'll be fine, give me a minute. Sometimes the memories come back too fast to control. I guzzled another soda, walked outside, and hollered for Louie. Once at Cedar, I sat down beside a quaint little farmhouse. The farm itself was only 10 acres, 6 acres of berries and 3 acres of orchards. The house, barn, and outbuildings took up the last acre. It was a golden evening as no one was around. The farm was so mysteriously quiet. I stood there for a moment to let the atmosphere sink in. I noticed the big red barn, lit by the evening sun, and it drew me, so I went for a walk around the backside. It was surprising. Once on the backside, every few steps sent scores of garter snakes scurrying up under the barn. There were hundreds. I could only wonder what role they played in this universe. They still acted like snakes and sent chills up my legs. I came to a narrow deck which had a set of stairs at both ends with a red and white Dutch door in the middle of it opening into the barn. It looked cool, but it seemed out of place. Also, while behind the barn I found an old dusty road 50 feet out from the building. I walked out to it and found tire tracks. How interesting, since I have seen no motor vehicles, outside the ones Art showed me, since coming to Sierra. I couldn't see the end of the road in either direction, and on the other side stood a companion white wooden fence following it into oblivion. The neighbor also grew berries, as there were rows upon rows of strawberries on the other side of the fence. At the other end of the barn I found 2 large swinging doors with 2 smaller loft doors above them. I opened one door to find a narrow aisle between 2 high stacks of baled hay on either side. I don't know why the hay was there. I was certain there were no animals on the farm. The hay was stacked up to a loft above them, 15 feet. I walked to the other end of the aisle where it opened to an equipment room with an old tractor parked in the center. That justifies the tracks on the old dirt road. I inspected the ancient tractor. I assumed it was built sometime in the 1950s. It was red, but aren't most tractors? Its rear wheels were as tall as I was, with big white rims. There was a big seat setting on the back, and I could only guess the size of butt that seat held. It looked like it could hold 3 of mine. I chuckled, relevant to my imagination. Right in front of the tractor was another set of barn doors that opened to the front of the building. There was a loft above the hay that spread across the whole back end of the barn and down both sides for 20 feet, 15 feet wide. A ladder leaned up against the floor of the loft. So, I checked it out. Other than a couple bales of hay by the loft doors, there was nothing else up there. I went back outside and closed both barn doors. In front of the barn was another road which circled the berry fields. There were 2 sets of barn doors hanging from the front of the barn. The first was the same one leading to the equipment room. The other set, near the other end, opened into a large space which took up a little over half of the whole barn. There were 6 stalls on the back side, 3 on each side of the Dutch door on the back side of the building. I still didn't get it because I kept no animals on the farm. Yet, the stalls and hay would suggest otherwise. Why didn't I recognize this? Well, I declined to burn my brain out struggling to figure it out. I am sure the answer will come in time. I saw, in the center of the open space, a raised platform right below a skylight. It looked like a dance floor, except in the center was an island with the outer edge surrounded with appliances and tall cabinets full of cookware. Folding chairs, folding tables, and boxes of canning jars were stacked up against the outside wall. I gathered this is where all the magic takes place. It looked like the command center for operations. As I was leaving the barn, I stopped in the doorway, looked at the berry fields which were clearly overgrown. I turned again to look at the equipment inside the barn, bent my head just a little, and said to myself, I can't pick all those berries and preserve them all by myself. Something is missing. Again, I would not struggle to figure it out. I was sure it would all work out in the end. As I stepped back outside, I saw that it was clouding up. The sky had filled with broken clouds, and as I got a short distance from the barn, one discovered me as it poured right above me. I hurried on to the porch where several inviting chairs sat scattered around, encouraging me to have a seat. I was delighted to be out of the rain, and the porch was an excellent spot to view the sunset. The home showed its age as an old two-story farmhouse with a porch wrapped around the whole residence. I sat for a while watching the rain dissipate as the sun went down. Eventually, I retired for the night with the light of a full moon beaming through the windows. It lit up the whole house and countryside. How peaceful, and somewhat lonely, but peaceful. I got up too early the next morning. I still loved my sleep. For me, it made each day seem like a brand new day. I guess I unknowingly woke up for a reason because I wasn't up 10 minutes before several people showed up. Dana walked in and began preparing breakfast. I guess she was planning on making peanut butter cookies as following behind came her little friend from Neon. It surprised me by how many people showed up in the morning, although I wondered why I didn't recognize most. 23 people showed up for breakfast, including a young, attractive woman named Alex. She was 5'7" with long dark thick red wavy hair, almost auburn. Her eyes radiated a rare shade of green when she smiled. I looked twice because she was so gorgeous. All immortals are gorgeous people, but there are just those who stand out above the others, to someone, me. She must have detected me staring at her, because the first thing she said with her rich Irish accent, smiling all the while, "Hello, Jeff. We know each other. We are best friends, and I have missed you." I thought to myself, what? Pretending like it was no big deal. I said, "Hi back," which was all the words I could get out without slobbering. She chuckled, then turned to help Dana in the kitchen. Back on Earth, I might have been interested in her, certain something she said stole my attention. I'm sure it was hello. Oh well. She must have known something about my situation because of how she greeted me. It made little sense. I didn't remember her. While we ate breakfast, I told the group what has transpired. They all smiled, patted me on the back, and then headed out to the berry fields. It meant nothing to them, and I was slightly insulted. I looked at Dana, she at me. Once everyone left the kitchen, I asked Dana about Alex. She told me Alex already knew what has taken place. Dana told me Jack had informed her of my condition. Dana informed me, she has been checking up on you since your transformation. She calls me for updates. She knew in your state she might be a distraction. I became quiet. I understood that there are probably a great number of people I know and have not had contact with since my transformation. My mind made some vacant attempts to normalize my feelings, but my heart refused to get over those nervous emotions. She unquestionably impacted me. She had to be someone special, and as hard as I tried my best to be nonchalant, unaffected, I was just too clumsy around her. I headed out to the fields where everyone was picking berries and hauling them over to the barn. I wandered over to the barn first to see what was going on inside. Several young people were inside preparing the equipment for making jam. I noticed a young couple in love, although nowadays, young is like 35, maybe 50 years old. I snickered to myself as the young man was the young lady's indentured servant. She ordered him around like it was nobody's business. Well, not ordered, but he waited upon her slightest whim. I had given no consideration to that kind of love here on Sierra, other than a few minutes ago. Alex. nor I, would ever have that kind of relationship. Immortals did not marry or fall in love anymore. They had something much richer, more desirable. Mortals still fell in love, married and had families, and these two expressed that kind of love. I felt like a hypocrite. I shook my head as I headed outside to help pick berries. While standing out in the field, someone hit me with a strawberry right on the side of my head. I looked around to pinpoint the assailant, but no one appeared guilty. Then, another one hit me in the same place. Only this time, I detected the offender. It was the little angel friend of Dana's, and she was flying 15 feet off the ground holding another berry. I suspected she intended it for me, so I picked one to throw it at her as fast as I could, but she was too fast. She struck with precision once again, right on the side of my face. I yelled, "Oh, bring it on, baby." I must have thrown 20 berries at her without landing a single one. She, on the other hand, was accurate, turning half of my face red with berry juice. I yelled for Dana. As soon as I hollered, she took off like lightning. I laughed as I continued picking berries. We made jam with every kind of berry there is on earth, on the first day. The second day, we invaded the orchards picking all the different fruit, peaches, pears, plums, cherries, and apples. We picked more than we could use. We canned what we didn't eat. On the third day, a flatbed truck showed up carrying all kinds of food. It was an old red 1949 Ford flatbed. It was the first actual working vehicle, besides the tractor, I had personally seen since I have come here. I had to get up close. It was fabulously restored, and I wanted to get in and drive it, but it was full of our lunch. Transportation crafts began arriving. My family, Jack's family, all the other families joined us. Apparently, it was an annual picnic. We placed several tables in the yard and everyone put the food from the truck on them. I could smell cooking coming from the barn. Dana and others were baking all kinds of breads and casseroles. 4 BBQs sat at the end of one table full of burgers and hot dogs. 2 young men manned them. Children set plates and silverware on the table while the young couple set out jars of jam. I didn't remember this, so I purposely slowed down to savor the occasion. Sophie brought 6 horses with her and put them in the stalls in the barn. A group of kids carried hay for them, and gave them water. Mystery solved. As we sat around talking, another person brought 4 more horses. So, several kids with 2 adults went horseback riding. Most of the other kids enjoyed their youth by running around crazy. The older boys discovered the hayloft at the far end of the barn. Dana pulled the tractor out, so they made forts to play King of the Hill. In the evening, everybody left except Jack. He and I sat on the front porch recalling the day. Later, while Jack and I were sitting and talking, Dana, the little fairy, landed on my shoulder, crawled down into my shirt pocket, and fell asleep. I was cautious not to move so as not to wake her. Turning to Jack, I said, "I have been here for over 7 months, and I have not had that eye-opening moment, or a life-changing epiphany yet." He replied, "When it takes place, you will understand why you are here. Take in all you can, Jeff. You will need to tell your story to anyone who will listen, and some will not." We talked into the night regarding the duties of a watcher, including many recent events in Sierra. I asked him about Alex. He informed me she was a fellow watcher. She and I had become close. He said, "She is holding back for fear you would get information from her you should not know. She always shows up at holiday and stays through Thanksgiving. She did not come this year because she did not wish to complicate or distract from your situation." That made me unhappy, although she complicated the last 3 days. I understood and hoped someday we would be as close as Jack suggested because I obviously had feelings for her. I was tired and went to bed, so I took off and laid, so delicately, my shirt with the little angel in the pocket on a soft chair in the living room. When I woke up, the farm was empty, except for Dana, who came back and was in the kitchen cooking me breakfast, bacon, eggs, hash browns and hot cakes. I said, "After all the food I ate yesterday, I can't imagine eating anything now." "Oh, shut up, sit down and eat," she demanded. I guess I was ravenous, more than I realized. I ate everything she put before me. Honestly, I wasn't positive I ate because of hunger or fear. Dana pointed out a case of jam next to 2 cases of canned goods sitting on the kitchen counter for me. When Dana left, I made her take them with her. I stayed for another walk through the orchards before I left. The sun was up, and the sky spread bright blue above the trees. The air was cool from the shade and carried a strong bouquet of ripe pears combined with the fresh scent of dampness and dirt. I embraced it as I walked around for a time before returning home. The first night back I had the same man on the beach dream. It troubled me. The second time was as if I could feel the anguish the young man felt as the beast struck him. I am not altogether sure it was a dream. Just because it took place after I had gone to bed, doesn't mean I slept. After all, the way I keep popping around, who knows? The next morning, while enjoying coffee out on the back patio, I thought about the city of commerce. Commerce was where most of the business of Sierra was conducted. Hundreds of meetings were held there every day. I recalled I have attended many meetings throughout the day as part of my obligation as a watcher. I asked Dana, I am thinking of going to commerce, will I have any foreseeable problems getting there on my own? She responded, transportation maintains a record of all the places you go, and keeps track of all the property you own. If you said take me to my condo in commerce, it would know where you wanted to go. If you ever get lost, say take me home. The craft will deliver you here every time. Generally, I would have that discussion with Louis, but Louis wasn't traveling with me because I required a smaller craft. Since the condo was on the 7th floor of a building downtown, it proved easier to get into the condo by landing on its patio. Louis could not drop me off on the patio. As I approached commerce, its beauty overcame me. I had a notion of what it looked like, but wasn't prepared for what it literally looked like. I wondered to myself why I took so long to venture here. There were certain things that just seemed out of sync for me. I couldn't quite figure it out. It seemed I would have come here at least 100 times by now. I guess I was being more led around than giving into my normal poking around. City of Commerce was the largest city in Sierra and was built on the planet Commerce. All people go there to conduct government business throughout Sierra. The city itself is 60 miles square, and contained 20 different districts with most the districts comprising shops, guild offices, and squares. All the buildings in the district of my condo looked like modern-day pyramids. Each pyramid took up 9 square city blocks and stood 20 stories high. The pyramid district housed mostly hotels, restaurants, conference rooms, and condos. All the condos were built in the pyramid district of town. Each pyramid contained 200 condos and half as many little shops to benefit the residents. An elevator ran up at each corner of each building and stopped at each floor. My condo was on the 7th floor right at the southwest corner. The streets below were made of brick and cobblestone, 80 feet wide. In the middle sat 2 lines of benches, outlining 2 sets of rails where small old-fashioned trolleys would come and go in both directions, crisscrossing at each intersection. The walkways were always occupied with an alphabet of food vendors. At the east edge of town was a river, with a waterfall at the northeast corner of the city. A road leads over a bridge crossing the river then heading southeast out into the suburbs. Several 100,000 inhabitants made up several neighborhoods outside the city. Most adults living on the outskirts worked in the city. I owned a 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo more than big enough to be comfortable. Most significant, it came with a chef's kitchen which was right next to the patio, splendid. I landed the craft on the patio. The patio was decorated with fine mason work with a fountain in the middle and besieged by a circular spot of grass. Walls lining it were constructed of grey-colored granite stones, and each one cut 4 foot by 2 foot wide. Its outer edge has an outer wall made of similar stones, high enough to look over and see the street below. Also, the river could be seen from there. Soon after I arrived, I had flashes about the chef's kitchen. I liked to cook and I remember in the past standing in the kitchen of the condo watching instruction videos on a drop screen standing behind the stove cooking, and my family always sitting at the table full of food and preparing to eat. My kids with my friends were always there, and I was always ambitious to find out if they liked my cooking. Now, I missed my kids again. I walked back outside onto the patio to look over the wall. People were busy scurrying around below. Commerce was an active place. I looked down towards the river where a mist rose in the cool evening air. No matter how noisy commerce became down below, it always remained quiet on my comfortable patio. Jack came by early the next morning. Again, what is with the early morning and Jack? Has he ever heard of brunch? I thought maybe there was a fire or something when the doorbell rang so early. I made my way to the door and after opening it I just stood there staring at him. "Are you going to let me in?" he asked. "Jack. What time is it?" "Well, it is 3 p.m. where I came from," he replied. "Oh, okay, come on in." He gave me time to wake up. From there, we spent most of the day walking around town. We stopped in at the Watcher building. Over 2,000 people worked there. Each of the council members had their offices in the building, along with 750 visitors and 1,100 support staff, like clerks, secretaries, receptionists, and other maintenance personnel. Each council member had 2 assistants. Among other duties, their assistants would stand in for the council member when they weren't accessible. Each council member's assistants had 25 assistants under them called visitors. The visitors traveled from place to place for observances. An observance was the act of going to a place and remaining for a time interacting with the people and the government. Even though no visitor was authorized to make final decisions affecting any person or group, their input was of utmost importance as reporting agents. It was not a spy agency, and the visitor notified the whole community when they arrived and anyone could approach them. They became the eyes and ears of Sierra while on site. In addition, council members and visitors held meetings once a month for deliberating any substantial issues that might come up during an observance. That is one reason there are so many conferences in commerce taking place daily. Although most assignments were based on orders, no particular reason was necessary for going on an observance, other than to be on site. If there was significant activity on a site, the watcher would then come and observe. Otherwise, it would be an insurmountable task for the watcher to be everywhere at once, which made watchers more management than foot patrol. Jack advised me the watchers asked to increase the position of visitor from 25 to 50 per team. That generated a complication because each visitor had a troop of 4 support staff. We would have to remodel or build a new building to raise the number of visitors. Jack reminded me, if I even understood in the first place, we previously elected to expand the count to 50. With the population at 65 million, the present group of visitors was stretched too thin. Also, I met 2 of my 4 secretaries, Zoe and Pamela, or Zoe and Pam. Jack took me into the office and called both in. He explained to them I was still in an impaired state and wouldn't speculate when I would be back to myself. Zoe said all right and asked to go on vacation for 2 months. Pam smiled and instructed me to hasten and get back to the office. She was becoming bored and had to find busy work to keep herself occupied. Then she asked if she could take one of the new visitor positions coming available. I couldn't answer her right then, and I told them I would do my best to hurry back. We all rose and hugged each other. Both fled the office, going back to their desks as Jack and I left. I sensed the eyes on my back as people gawked and murmured on my way out. I advised Jack to award Pam one of the visitor positions. A short while afterward, as we walked, we came across a flower shop where I recognized the woman standing and directing a herd of other adults and children around her. She was in the middle of instructing the children about flower compositions. I stood watching as she struggled to describe to them the art of such. Then she would stop and look at them to see if they were listening. The kids would stop whatever they were doing, mostly goofing off, and stare back at her. She looked over my direction, as she saw me standing there, and said, "Hi, Jeff." I responded, "Hi." I didn't know who it was yet, and she kept looking at me. So, I walked over and told her of my condition and how I didn't recognize too many people. She told me her name was Kelly. A light came on. Far out. I knew Kelly from when I served in the Navy as a young man back on Earth, and then ran into her again when I was much older, and we became friends again. She spent the first 100 years as a biological scientist on board the North Ship, working regularly with Casey and Crystal. She gave her job up to be closer to her family on a more regular basis. Since, she has created and now owns this store, which was a combination flower and craft store. I had no clue even such a place existed until she told me. All the other adults and kids were her family. At the end of the tribulation, and as an immortal, she took on a family of 7 kids. I agreed she was crazy, but apparently, she knew the parents well before the tribulation. The parents got involved with Mr. Smith's big family program, but died before the Great War, leaving behind the children. She adopted them after learning who the kids' parents were, and under the circumstances sought to care for them. Now the kids have had their own kids and more kids have had more kids, culminating in her daily mad routine of teaching them all the business. Clearly, she was setting up an army to take over some neighborhood or small town. She relied on the help of her grown children and grandchildren. It seemed a constant madhouse. I chuckled as it was amazing how she even got any work done. We talked for a while, then said goodbye, see you soon. She was living the life many took up in God's kingdom, simple, but fulfilling. I sensed all along, while talking to her, there was something about Kelly which would be detrimental to the story, and I perceived she would be influential when it comes time to put it down on paper. I sensed something. At the moment, she was still alive back on Earth, and when I get back I will say something, not everything of course. After I tell her, maybe, she will change her mind and go into cattle ranching or something much different from growing flowers and kids on the streets of commerce. Afterward, we stopped at a hot dog stand to order lunch. The vendor said, "Hiya, Jeff, Jack." Jack answered, "Howdy, Lyle." I now remembered Lyle. He was one of the 15 watchers. In his spare time, he sold hot dogs on the walkway. Hilarious. I was sure he must be in the middle of an observation. We sat to talk for a while, and Lyle joined in when able to get away from his stand. He was more than a little absorbed in my situation. I became a little suspicious when he asked who would take my place should I not come back. Jack responded, I or Alex would take over and you would be relegated to visitor. I bust out laughing from the look on his face. He took it in stride and continued to smile. I mentioned I planned to attend 1 or 2 meetings in town. Lyle chuckled and said, "Good luck with that." Then, Jack told me Dave might be found in a particular conference room for a meeting that afternoon. He gave me directions. I was off. As I attended the meeting, they asked for my judgment, which I at first declined, stating I was only observing. The meeting was regarding the Polynesians and the islands off the coast of 6 Rivers. Dave explained to them concerning the Cherokee Nation, who claimed the boundary controls over the area of ocean where the islands existed, and supported the move. Because the Cherokees were land dwellers, they had no use for the islands and were looking forward to trading with the Polynesians. The islands themselves provided the right climate for growing all kinds of tropical fruit, which violated no current required policies when changing the status of a particular parcel of land. When pressed again for comment, I said, the seals and the iguanas could be transferred. A colony of seals took up habitation there in late spring when the salmon passed during their annual migration. It would be no obstacle to round them up and move them to another area. Plenty of suitable places were convenient for their habitation, which would not force a change in their habits. I said it should take place as long as they have approved the proper border changes, and if such proved to be the case, it should be an easy resolution. They could find no Syrian policies, or articles prohibiting the move. They agreed and confirmed the move, unanimously. Dave and I spoke for a while afterward. I asked him if he wanted to get together for dinner, but he needed to get back to meet with the Polynesians and Cherokee leaders as each side was eager to get moving. I returned to the condo early evening. Since the kitchen was stocked with all kinds of food, I decided that I would make lasagna. I have an idea how to make it, but wasn't positive of all the ingredients. So, I said TV. Nothing transpired. Okay, screen. I shouted. The screen dropped from the ceiling against the back wall on the other side of the island. I remembered watching many cooking videos on this screen. Once I said cooking videos, I was in business. After traveling through a list of cooking channels on the screen, I recalled the thousands of channels covering everything Sierra. The tourist channel provided hour-long shows revealing all the distant places to go. Out of curiosity, I asked for a program on Jerusalem. "You're not allowed to view such programming," it responded with an unnatural, inhuman voice. First thing, I sensed Big Brother watching my every move. I spent an hour looking at all the different channels until I returned to the cooking channel for lasagna in particular. I was halfway through the process when a knock came at the door. When I answered, Alex, the young, beautiful woman, was standing there smiling at me. "Hi, Jeff," she said, with her sweet Irish accent. I said hi back and then an awkward pause. Then she asked, "Are you going to invite me in?" I am now thinking I have issues with answering the door. "Please come in," I responded. She stepped in, then gave me a hug and said she was on her patio when she heard my screen. It sounded like the cooking channel. "So, I suspected you might be cooking, and hoped you would like company," she said, standing there gazing into my eyes. This was a pleasant surprise even though I kept trying to place her. I didn't understand why I couldn't recognize her as much as I should, but I felt warm feelings for her as if we were close. Yet, the feelings felt foggy. She continued, "I am here for a meeting tomorrow. A developer wants to build a new hotel on the coast in Old England. I am presenting for the owner who is new in their position. She is a friend of mine, and I am helping her through the legal process. I heard you over here and I am famished, and fortunately for me, I love your cooking." Aha, she likes to live dangerously. I invited her to have a seat as I pointed to the chairs up against the kitchen island. 4 high-back chairs set on the outside nestled under its counter below the screen. She took a seat as I continued cooking. She already knew my condition, so no reason to restate it. Instead, she explained how she got saved and died as a young girl in Ireland. She and her twin sister, Mary, had perished when young during the potato famine in Ireland back in 1848. Her father was a preacher, and she and her sister got saved at a young age, before they died. The rest of her family died soon after her and her sister. Today, they live in the small town of Wexford in Carlingford, and she visits them every other weekend for Sabbath. She has owned the condo next to me for over 90 years. She got it when the previous owner moved back to Earth. Consequently, we became close friends, and devoted a great deal of time together. I tormented my brain trying to remember, twins? I would get fragments of information, but nothing concrete. Obviously, she was important. I looked at her then said I wish I could remember more. Honestly, it hurts I can't. She laughed. "Don't worry, Jeff. We are close to one another, and I have no intention of altering our relationship just because I am a stranger to you," she smiled. Then, she said in a tender womanly voice, "I will remember for the both of us. Ask me anything and I will straighten it out for you. With that being said, I hope you understand I cannot tell you everything you might wish to know." I replied, "I understand, even the screen won't tell me anything. It's unnerving and makes me think of Big Brother government." She added, "Undoubtedly, it's both exciting yet frustrating for you. I have been given only a minor role since Jack has taken the lead. What you need to learn doesn't encompass me. Well, it does not include many of your friends if I interpret correctly, although I look forward to seeing you when possible." The rest of the evening, we talked of her position within the council, commerce. I asked her how long had we been meeting at the farm. She said we have been meeting there for over 5 years. She still had jams from the year before. Then I asked her what relationship she had with Jack. She and Jack had equal positions within the council, sharing second in command. Either one would fill in for me when needed. I was not sure why I asked. Through our conversation, during dinner, I could tell she was more than competent. After supper we walked out onto the patio to have a cup of after-dinner green tea. We stood leaning over the wall watching the activity below. Even though it was evening, people kept busy running around, scurrying from place to place. Alex pointed to the sky and mentioned that it was the night of crescent moons. The moons circling Commerce rise together crescent every 21 years. So, we went for a walk just as the seventh and last moon came up over the horizon. The night could not have been more perfect with all the moons hanging low in the eastern sky. The evening was mostly warm with exception of a cool breeze coming from the river. We held hands as we walked, but it would not, nor could not, go any further. I was still mortal, she wasn't, which made for some complex feelings for me. I mentioned since we are getting reacquainted, we should spend more time together. Please come by anywhere, anytime you would like. I will. You do the same, she said as I closed the door behind her. I felt bad treating her more like a guest than a friend, although from that moment on, I planned to keep in contact with her on a more regular basis. When we did, we talked for hours. She came over for the Sabbaths when she wasn't with her family. Other than my kids, she was next closest. I was certain when I go back to my world, I will think of her often. I became tired and suspected the mortal side of me was reminding me who I was. What a pain. Of me was reminding me who I was. What a pain. Of me was reminding me who I was. What a pain. Of me was reminding me who I was. What a pain. Of me was reminding me who